Welcome to Bad Elizabeth. I'm your host, Gideon Evans.
And I'm your host, Kathy Egan-Taylor. The premise of this show is exactly what it sounds like. Each episode, we profile a different Elizabeth, or derivation of the name.
Like Betsy.
Or Lilibet.
Or Lysander.
Who deserves to be called bad.
These Elizabeths run the gamut, from royalty to radicals.
This episode is going to be explosive.
That's our producer and engineer, Will Beckton of Jet Road Studios.
Hi, guys.
Hi.
Our episode today is about Elizabeth Ann Duke.
Also known as Elizabeth Anna Duke.
Huh.
That's some alias.
Welcome to Bad Elizabeth. I am your co-host, Gideon Evans.
And I'm Kathy Egan-Taylor.
And we're here, of course, in Studio City at Jet Road Studios with Will Beckton.
Hi, guys.
This is a podcast about Bad Elizabeths, exactly as it sounds.
That's right. We do have to repeat because we do get haters occasionally who think we hate Elizabeths, and we don't.
We did get that one negative review. You two are out hating Elizabeths.
So I'm overcompensating by repeating this all the time. I think most people know. We're just choosing some Elizabeths that have some dubiousness to them.
Exactly.
And I know we want to get into the show, and Will told me not to bring this up, but do you like my shirt?
I've never seen a shirt like this, and I've never seen Gideon in a shirt like this. The shirt you're wearing right now has two roosters on it.
Right.
One on each shoulder.
It's an audio medium, so you do have to describe it.
It's a bit distracting.
Okay.
It's a bit loud.
All right. Okay.
The roosters are facing in opposite directions.
And they're not cockfighting roosters, and we've talked about cockfighting on this show before, but they would be perfect if we put little spurs on their claws.
That's right.
Is that all you need to convert a rooster to cockfighting rooster is the blades?
I think so. I mean, just make them
I would
angry and then
imagine.
put some blades on them.
Yeah, and the experience of being in a lot of fights. I'm sure
Exactly.
you get better and better.
Anyway, well, it's a lovely shirt. It's
Yes.
it's unique.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
So we are talking today about Elizabeth Ann or Anna Duke,
Mhm.
who's part of the May 19th Communist Organization, which is an interesting sort of splinter group from the Weather Underground. It was a female-led violent revolutionary group that were active in America from 78 to 1985. They created a new sisterhood of the bomb and the gun. They would rob banks and Brinks trucks, and they would break people out of jail. They set up safe houses. They had arsenals of weapons.
Kind of like one battle after another. The Paul Thomas Anderson movie. A lot of these groups were associated with like the 60s and a little bit later, but this movie takes place now. People are talking about these types of groups that use violence and extreme techniques for getting their politics across.
They don't even really know what their politics are. They're just anti-everything.
A lot of them, yeah.
Yes. This group is a female-led violent revolutionary group and mostly lesbian-led group. They kind of like were splintered from the Weather Underground.
Right, the Weather Underground came to be more in the 60s.
Yeah.
But I think they were almost defunct by the time May 19th came along. We're looking at this Elizabeth Betty Ann Duke that was part of May 19th, and she was just one member of the group. So there's a lot of names, a lot of information. It's fascinating shit. But because there's so much going on with this topic, we're going to lean a bit on our guest who's coming later on. His name is Bill Rosenau, and he has a book called Tonight We Bombed the U.S. Capitol. And he's basically the only expert on Earth about this group and this woman in particular. So we're excited to talk to Bill later.
Elizabeth Anna Duke, we don't know much about her. She is currently 85, and she's wanted.
She's on the lam.
She's on the lam. At 85, I don't know where the lam is.
No, she's probably in a rocking chair.
She is from Beeville, Texas.
Okay. I mean, part of the purpose of these groups is they're secretive. So some of them we know more than others. What's her name? Patty Hearst.
Patty Hearst. Well,
What was the group she was in?
she was the Simeon
Symbolize Liberation Army.
Yes.
Yeah.
Basically, a lot of these people are educated, privileged kids. When she was kidnapped and held for ransom, she dug it.
They probably didn't call themselves terrorists, right?
Oh, no, they thought they were activists.
Right.
You know, they're revolutionaries.
Well, there's that saying, one person's terrorist is another's freedom fighter, right?
Exactly. Here's the interesting thing, too. The people who were sort of radicals in the 60s, a lot of those people come the 70s, 80s, and we're coming into Reagan America right now, where
Yeah.
wealth is king and all that type of stuff. They all went to grad school. They became normal people, right? And they became the man, just like everybody else. But then there was a string, a lot of women who were connected to these, and a lot of them were lesbians that sort of carried on.
Hmm.
So the interesting thing to me, because I'm always fascinated by underground groups like this. It's kind of hard not to be. Part of it is just the whole like living off the grid thing. Like, was she completely separated from her family or friend? Was it basically her whole world
Yes.
at a certain point?
That's what tends to happen. There are people who are disenfranchised in one shape or form. It could be from their family. They generally don't have their family members. Like, this is almost like cultish.
Yeah.
And also, like, women are kind of perfect for this type of stuff. We know how to set things up. We can get you safe houses. We get everything organized. We plan ahead. We know how to deal with this stuff. So it was interesting that this was strictly a group of women.
Yeah.
But these are basically women who were disenfranchised in one form or another, whether for their sexuality, whether what expected them of their families. They just didn't want to be into that role.
Yeah.
And that's what they found this group to work with, who supported each other. But as typical, they would turn on each other, too.
Yeah. And did they have different roles, like in one battle after another? Like, was there one that was an expert in bombs, one was the marksman, and one was the coordinator?
Yes, they all were good at bomb making, apparently.
Oh, really?
They were good at bomb making, and they were good at breaking people out of jail who were arrested radicals, so to speak. And one of these people that she broke out of jail, his name was Willie Morales. He was a Puerto Rican radical who was a bomb maker. He was under surveillance. So he was actually caught while he was building a bomb, but the bomb blew up on him. So he lost 9 out of 10 fingers, and his face was completely disfigured. So
Wow.
He goes to jail, but while he's in jail, he's going to get prosthetic fingers. So they transfer him to a prison hospital. So he's in the prison hospital. While he's there, he tied together ace bandages and made a rope where he lowered himself.
Oh, my God.
Wait, so he was able to make a bedsheet ladder with one finger?
Yes, with stubs.
Oh, Jesus.
And a blown up face.
And a blown up face.
Oh, my God.
I think he broke a leg or something when he fell. So, I mean,
Might as well.
it's a crazy story. But anyway, she helped with that escape.
And he ended up escaping.
Was he part of a revolutionary group as well?
I think he was part of Flan, which was the Puerto Rican separatist group.
I love Flan.
Yeah. Also, they threatened to blow up the bicentennial in 1976.
Oh, and you're working.
Yeah, so I've been researching a lot about Flan. And they're not called Flan, they're the F-A-L-A-N.
I see.
It's just hard to not say flan.
Flan, exactly.
It's F-A-L-N, not F-L-A-N. But I do love Flan. Did she get arrested at some point?
She got arrested twice, and she got out on bail, and that's when she escaped.
So this woman, you say, there's not that much info about her who we're talking about. And it kind of makes sense because it sounds like she's slippery.
Well, the thing is, like, if we had more info about her, we'd know where she is. You know, the only thing I know is that she's from a small town in Texas, and she got radicalized, and she's been on the lam ever since.
Yeah.
So the thing that really made them huge was in 1983, they bombed the U.S. Capitol.
Wow, that's so crazy that I was totally unaware of that. 1983, not that long ago.
They bombed the U.S. Capitol, caused $1 million worth of damages, and then they embarked on like a 20-month spree with 5 more bombings, just randomly.
I mean, you have to imagine they're not in the best frame of mind, maybe. It seems random, and at that time, there were like hundreds of bombings, even in New York alone. It was actually a really common thing. So maybe that's why we didn't really know that much about it. There was just a lot of political violence.
Some people got away, some people didn't.
Yeah.
Some people did the time, some people didn't. And then they would splinter off and just go underground.
I think you probably become very isolated.
Yeah.
Like whenever I try to imagine myself going off grid or living underground or being on the lam, I always think about that Guns N' Roses song, "They're out to get me."
Mm-hmm.
I think your perception probably gets pretty warped.
We're social beings, and if you're in this kind of weird bubble with all these activated people all the time, your brain is going to get warped. That's another part of this whole story that, like, yes, these people were activated and radicals and doing these violent acts. And then when the groups end, that people either get back into society, or if they're on the wanted list, they're just running for their entire lives if they're lucky. And there's that movie, right? The Judd Hirsch.
Oh, Running on Empty.
That's a great movie.
I don't think I saw it. Is River Phoenix in
River
it?
Phoenix
Yeah,
was in
Martha
it. Martha
Plimpton's in
Plimpton.
it.
Judd Hirsch was the father. It's a great movie.
Do you remember the director?
I want to say it's Sidney Lumet. Christine Lottie was the wife.
I think that's a really fascinating thing, though. You have either the true believers or the people that just painted themselves into a corner and they can't go back to real society.
Yeah.
As far as trying to place yourself in their shoes, it's an interesting thought exercise, like the end of Goodfellas or whatever. It's like the witness protection program. Like,
Yeah.
how would I do in those circumstances? Like, Kathy, like, how do you think you'd do if you had to go off grid and you had to exist as a revolutionary? Do you think you have a good personality type for it?
I think I'd be great at it.
I kind of do too.
I think I'd be great at it. I'm a loner. My husband is away for the holiday weekend. I miss him, but I love being alone. It's so great. My fantasy is to move up to Northern California and be a waitress.
Changing everything wouldn't be a shock to your system.
No.
If we all had to pick our ideal revolutionary location and roles, mine would be Big Sur,
That sounds nice.
work in a cafe, and be a bomb maker. I think those would be my three.
No, but Big Sur is not a good place because there's only one. It's Pacific Coast Highway, right?
It's escape route challenge.
Yeah,
that's
you
for
can't. There's no escape route because, like, if a boulder falls down, you're fucked. You know what I mean?
Even like big rainstorms.
Yeah,
I think
it floods
the road,
everything out. Exactly.
I know it would be risky to try to go to the border, go to Canada and live in like Nova Scotia in like a cute fisherman town. Just like living that simple life. And I could like make folk art with a knife.
You carve soap.
Right. But I also wanted to say, I know you, Kathy, and I, we want to get more and more people to be aware of our podcast.
Yeah.
We were like, how awesome would it be if we could find Elizabeth Duke?
DM Gideon.
Right. thatelizabethpod@gmail.com. We don't have to reveal your name. We can alter your voice.
555-1212.
Right. No, but I do think that would be amazing, wouldn't it?
With any of these revolutionary groups, the where are they now aspect of it is always so interesting. You know,
Definitely.
it's definitely one thing to kind of like go out in a blaze of glory. It's another thing to kind of have to live your life in the shadow of what you did as an impressionable 20-something.
Exactly.
And I think some of the Weather Underground people, like, aren't they like public speakers and stuff like that? I mean, there is a way to rehabilitate your reputation after being a part of one of these things. The reentry is the interesting part to figure out.
It's called book deals. So anyway, she has been on the lam since 1983, after this Capitol bombing. And it was interesting because I was reading about another radical group, and I didn't realize that there was an underground railroad of like lesbians.
Oh, wow.
That were based in Narberth, Pennsylvania.
When was that?
This was like in the 80s and
Oh, my
70s.
goodness.
It was an interesting thing because I'm from Philadelphia and I didn't like Narberth, really. There was a collective of lesbian
What is
undergrounds.
that place like?
Narberth, Pennsylvania. It's part of the main line. It's a nice,
Yeah.
we called it Narbtown.
Okay.
I mean, I think that was an interesting thing. I think it was like a group of women, they found each other and they had a cause and they had a purpose.
So, guys, based on what we know about May 19th and based on what we know about Elizabeth Duke, is she bad?
I think so.
Yeah. There are certain ways of making arguments that could make it seem a little more textured.
This story is it's intriguing because she's still on the lam. It's a very specific, interesting, female-led group of radicals. Luckily, we're going to be talking to William Rosenau, who wrote the book about this.
Very well informed, and he's going to know his shit. Joining us now from Washington, D.C. is Bill Rosenau, the author of Tonight We Bombed the U.S. Capitol, the explosive story of May 19th, America's first female terrorist group, a gripping account of a revolutionary group who was active in the late 1970s and early 1980s. It's also suddenly topical now. We have that movie One Battle After Another, and then just the other day there was an assassination attempt on the president. So political violence is something people are talking about. Thank you so much, Bill, for joining us on Bad Elizabeth.
Well, thank you very much. It's great to be here.
Bill, how did you come upon this story? How did you start following radicals and the Weather Underground? Like, what piqued your interest here?
There were a few things. I went to Columbia as an undergrad in the late 70s and early 1980s. And during this time, a whole bunch of people who had been in the Weather Underground organization, the sort of preeminent leftist terrorist group of the 70s started to emerge, and it was a big story. And some of them had lived actually near Columbia, and I probably saw some of them on the street, not knowing who they were because they were underground. And then later, I became a terrorism researcher and a political scientist at the RAND Corporation, and terrorism was part of my portfolio, looking at domestic terrorist groups. I kept coming across these references to something called the May 19th Communist Organization. And it was always sort of mentioned in passing, and this was just a bunch of old Weather Underground types, and there would just be a few comments about it, and I became fascinated. And then over the years, just sort of informally began collecting information, and I realized, why has no one written about this? I mean, there have been a few things written about them, but nothing comprehensive. And I thought, well, not only were they sort of forgotten violent extremist group, but they were a violent extremist group founded and led by women. I thought, this is just too good. And they bombed the U.S. Capitol on November 7th, 1983. And so it just all came together, and I found that their individual stories so compelling, and their trajectory from 60s college campus protesters to armed revolutionaries to full-blown terrorists. When the opera's over and the fat lady, so to speak, is sung, and you're still on stage, or you want to be on stage, what kind of mental universe do you inhabit? So those are some of the reasons.
What does the name of the group May 19th mean?
Well, May 19th was the birthday of two of the heroes of the group, Malcolm X and Ho Chi Minh. So there's a message, a little Easter egg in the name. It's an homage to Malcolm X and Ho Chi Minh.
I did a little bit of research. I was just curious who else had May 19th birthdays. And apparently Andre the Giant, Arsenio Hall, and Grace Jones.
Three great people.
We're all May 19th.
Obviously we've come to this story because we're looking at one particular member of the group, Betty Ann Duke. She's a woman who's still on the lam as far as we know right now. But maybe we could start by giving sort of an idea, a context of the time of how these women became radicalized. How did that evolve?
Almost all of the members had been 60s radicals. They had been in Students for Democratic Society. They had been in the Weather Underground organization. And they just kept on doing what they were doing, even after most of their former comrades had left the scene. So they remained animated by their self-described revolutionary anti-imperialism. They remained committed to supporting armed struggles in what was then called the Third World, in places like Zimbabwe and Grenada and elsewhere. And they started off, this small group of women, started off I would say, sort of in an above ground way in 1978, 1979. They'd issue leaflets, they had meetings, they would have protest meetings, they would give speeches supporting various causes, very important in supporting LGBT, sorry.
It's a hard one sometimes.
They were prominent supporters of the Third World, of people in the United States, so-called Third World people that they considered to be part of this interior colony. So they're doing this very above-ground politics. They're in Park Slope, Brooklyn. Hard to imagine nowadays seeing those kind of radicals, or maybe they're still there. I don't know. They were in Park Slope. They had an outpost in Chicago, in Austin, Texas, which we'll come back to, and elsewhere in the country. Never more than 100 people, I would say. And a lot of this information is based on declassified FBI files. But eventually they came into the orbit. There was a man called Matula Shakur, and he was an acupuncturist trained in Quebec. He had an acupuncture clinic up in Harlem, and he would treat patients there. He was also very involved in something called the Lincoln Detox Program, which was up in the Bronx, part of the Lincoln Hospital. Mm-hmm. Kind of a crazy story in its own right. Lincoln Detox, they believed in acupuncture. They were opposed to methadone as an alternative to heroin, but they were also a political base. It was sort of a political foundation. And they did a lot of recruiting from there. They did a lot of protesting from there, really annoying the city over the course of many years. People like Ed Koch, who eventually shut it down, Chuck Schumer, were very upset about this. But through Lincoln Detox and the acupuncture stuff, one of the members of May 19th met Matulu Shakur. Another thing about Matulu, his nephew and later stepson, interesting, was none other than Tupac Shakur.
I was going to ask.
Yes, the rap great. So Matulu Shakur His brother was married to a woman who gave birth to Tupac, and they got divorced, and Mutulu got married to his brother's ex-wife.
Wow.
It's quite a family.
Interesting.
Yes.
So Mutulu was known as Doc. That was his nom de guerre, Doc Shakur. And he had his acupuncture clinic. He had this brownstone in Brooklyn. He had a lot of expenses, but he also had a big drug habit. He was very into cocaine. And he and some of his comrades went on a bank robbing spree in the late 1970s. Bank robbery, armored car robberies, in some cases netting hundreds of thousands of dollars. And the women of M19, some of them became involved in this. They were doing reconnaissance. They were renting safe houses. They were renting cars. They were nice-looking, college-educated white ladies who could do things that Doc Shakur and some of his ex-con buddies who were Black couldn't do without inviting police attention. So for a number of years, they were side by side with Doc and what he called the family. The women called themselves the White Edge, and Doc referred to the women as the Crackers.
The Crackers.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
But he was a very charismatic character. He'd tell the women that he was raising money for something called the Republic of New Africa, which was a group that was seeking to reclaim states in the South as a African-American homeland. Republic of New Africa had lots of members. It had consulates. How much of that money went to the Republic of New Africa and how much went into
His nose.
Yeah, his nose.
Yes.
It's not really clear.
Yeah.
So that is their entree to, I would say, really violent politics, although many of them had been in the Weather Underground and participated in bombings, including perhaps the notorious bombing on West 11th Street in the Village that brought down the entire house. So that was their entree. And then things got really hairy.
Yeah, it was interesting because women were really the backbone of a lot of this, the Weather Underground. As you said, a lot of college students, white college students like at Brandeis and whatnot, because you're right, they could get driver's license easily, passports easily, rent cars, rent safe houses, and no one really questioned them because they were proper looking women. So it was an interesting strategy.
Absolutely. And it worked very well for a long time. One of the members of May 19th, not Betty Ann, also from Texas, Marilyn Buck, a fascinating character, veterinarian, USDA meat inspector, described as the only white member of the Black Liberation Army in the Bay Area in the late 1960s and early 1970s. And she was arrested eventually, or was in prison for buying ammunition using a fake ID, which apparently is a federal crime. Was shipped off to a women's prison in West Virginia. This was the good old days where prison authorities believed that people could be rehabilitated. And so there were furloughs. One year she went to visit her parents who had moved to Galveston, came back 6 days later. The next year, 1973, if I'm not mistaken, gets another furlough to visit her lawyer in New York, Susan Tipograph, who's a recurring character, and never comes back. Things kind of came crashing down October 20th, 1981 in upstate New York.
And that was a botched Brinks job?
The Brinks job.
Yeah.
A really shocking episode. You had a Brinks guard killed, another one wounded. The wounded one, almost 20 years to the day, is in a garage in the basement of a building in Lower Manhattan, and he radios saying that a building has been hit and the police are telling me to get out. Of course, it was the World Trade Center, and
oh my goodness,
no one ever heard from him again after that. So amazing to me. And
terrible luck.
Also, the robbers, who included the family, Mutulu and others, did the real shooting, killed a Brinks guard, wounded a Brinks guard, and murdered 2 policemen from Nyack. The women, May 19th, were very involved. They had done surveillance. They had organized safe houses in New Jersey and Rockland County. They had rented getaway cars. They actually drove getaway cars. This became a shocking episode. Most of the women involved in the robbery were able to escape. Some weren't. Susan Rosenberg, who was one of the members, drove off the road, kind of freaked out during the course of this. And one of the women who was a driver, her name is Judy Clark, she gets stopped. She gets arrested. She's reaching for her pistol. She winds up with a massive sentence for murder. I believe it's second-degree murder. And she's locked up in Westchester. And she gets visited in 2016 in prison by none other than Andrew Cuomo.
That's right.
The governor.
And he likes her.
Who spends an hour with her. And he tells reporters, quote, "When you meet her, you get a sense of her soul." He commuted her sentence Finally, a few years later, April 2019, she gets parole and gets sprung. So the Brinks robbery, 1.6 million, the cops get all the money.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone's scattered. The heat is really on, nationwide for this bunch of cop killers. And that sends the women into survival mode. And they go deep underground. The ones who escaped, the FBI is all over them. They have to decide what they're going to do next, if anything.
And this is where Betty Ann comes in, because she was not part of this. She was a member of the group, but she was above ground, right? She was in Austin.
Yeah, she was in Austin.
So she's not yet on the FBI radar.
No, not yet. Although it's interesting, in 1980, a massive load of Unigel Tamptite, kind of dynamite, goes missing from the Bland Construction Company in Austin. I don't have any concrete proof. I think Betty Ann is involved in this. And this load of dynamite kind of makes its way around the East Coast and is probably used by the FALN, a Puerto Rican terrorist group that earlier had carried out the bombing of Francis Tavern in Lower Manhattan. And so she's involved in that. She's probably involved in buying weapons, but she's not part of the inner group yet. But she does move east.
Betty Ann Duke.
Yeah.
Bill, if you could just tell us, who is she in the world?
Sure. She's born in November of 1940, so she's a little bit older than some of the other women who wind up in May 19th, and she was born in Beeville, Texas, which apparently is a beautiful town. She's definitely the all-American girl. Straight-A student. She's a member of the National Honor Society. She's in the pep squad, winds up at Southwestern University. She's got a nice beehive hairdo. This is the early 1960s. Graduates in 62. She gets married, gets divorced in 65. She'd always had a political consciousness. She abhorred racism. She gets into graduate school, North Texas State University. In the mid-1960s, the anti-war movement is ramping up. She gets involved in student politics. She gets involved in campus protests. During one protest, she calls the Board of Regents a stupid bunch of motherfuckers. That gets her in big trouble. There's an obscenity charge. That's not the end of the world. She's highly intelligent. She's a really good writer. She wound up as a researcher in the Texas State Legislature. She's in Austin, which is, keep Austin weird.
And they had a big Weather Underground movement there as well.
Oh, yeah. In UT, there's definitely a scene there. And she gets involved with anti-racist activities, something called the John Brown Anti-Klan Committee. They have a newspaper. As the name suggests, they're fighting the Klan. They're demonstrating against the Klan. She's beginning to really get a name for herself as a left-wing organizer, radical. And so it's the early 1980s, and she's down in Austin with another gal who's from the Midwest, Linda Sue Evans, and they're kind of working together down there. And Betty Ann decides, it's not exactly clear how, she comes east, and she becomes part of, really by 82, 83, part of this new variation on May 19th, which is decided, despite the fact that they are hunted people in connection with Brinks and other things, they decide they're going to wage the armed struggle on their own through bombing.
One thing that I was curious about, and I think you mentioned in your book, is that a lot of these revolutionary groups were against a lot of things, but when you talk about what the society would look like that they wanted to see, it was a little hazier.
Yes, and that's not unusual. The prominent terrorism scholar and academic Bruce Hoffman has talked about this in respect to a lot of different revolutionary and terrorist groups at different times and different places. It's sort of more about the struggle. What the world is going to look like after the revolution is a little vaguer. It was certainly true in the case of a group like Shining Path in Peru. They came close to seizing power in Peru, but what they were going to put in its place, was it going to be like 1975 in Cambodia? It's not really clear. And May 19th I'm not comparing them to Shining Path or the Khmer Rouge, but the similar sort of vagueness. So I'm going to just pull this out because it's sitting across from me. Maybe you can see this.
Oh, yeah.
So this is an original poster.
And can you say what it says on there for people listening?
Yeah, it says, support the resistance conspiracy defendants. And this was a massive case in the late 1980s involving most of the people in May 19th. It was a big federal trial in D.C., and one of their front groups, the Committee to Fight Repression, put this poster out. I just bring this up because around the edges, it's got all these sort of phrases: human rights, self-determination, national liberation, women's liberation, peace, anti-imperialism, lesbian and gay rights. It's not really terribly specific. It's not really much of a program,
Yeah.
but it's just these are things that we like.
Yeah. I think very lofty ambitions, very idealistic.
Yeah.
They're not quite sure what the ends was, but they were going to make theater out of getting there.
Yeah.
We'll cross that bridge when we get there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, I love that you brought up the poster because you mentioned in the book a few times that graphic design, and my wife is a graphic designer, but just that was a very important part of the movement, making art and making posters and that sort of thing.
Absolutely. They had a front group called the Madame Binh Graphics Collective, and Madame Binh was a North Vietnamese, I want to say foreign ministry official, prominent woman in the communist regime in North Vietnam. They named it after her. And so they had a graphic sense. Some of the members had actually been to art school. Some would wind up teaching in art schools. And I've looked at the Madame Binh stuff, and it's pretty good for what they used to call agitprop. I mean, they definitely had a visual sense. Also, some of the women were also very skilled printers. That also became very useful when you wanted to run up a bunch of freaking fake IDs, which they did with enthusiasm.
Fake social security numbers, that description of that they would take them from dead babies. That was crazy.
The classic, the dead baby ruse. They had FBI. They had printed up warrants
Oh my God.
that they used when they were robbing a Stop and Shop.
Oh, that's right. I was going to ask you about that.
They went in there and they pretended to be DEA agents. And they were going to find all the dope that was kept in the safes of the
Stop and Shop.
the safes of the Stop and Shop.
But he didn't want to open it.
He didn't mind opening it after a while because they were waving guns in his face.
Right.
This is Alan Berkman, MD.
He was involved with May 19th.
Oh, yeah. Another fascinating character, much revered by some people on the extreme left. And this guy, Timothy Blanc, who was a sort of a junior banana in the group, but waved, guns in his face. And he's like, yeah, I'll open it. But then it turned out you needed a second key to get into the main safe. So they were only able to walk out with.
He was like, 20 grand or something like that, but enough to fund them for a little. They didn't have the family money as they did in the past.
They had pretty low overhead. They lived in pretty scruffy kind of student accommodations. A lot of them had jobs. It was not a glamorous lifestyle by any means, but it was relatively low cost to keep surviving.
I thought it was so interesting that for a while they kind of lived in these collectives.
Yes.
Where they're all roommates and they're kind of watching each other to make sure that nobody's straying off the path of, whatever they were for. But then they kind of decided we better just live regular lives so we don't raise any red flags.
Live in decent sized cities, but in sort of out of the way pockets. A couple of the retired FBI special agents I interviewed actually were fairly impressed with their underground tradecraft. They were really into disguises. They were pretty good at not attracting a lot of attention. Now, they're not just hiding out, though. They're making bombs, and they're bombing a whole set of targets over a 2-year period.
Part of the May 19th women's jobs, too, was to break people out of prison. One of the members of the committee, Typograph, she was a lawyer.
Yes.
For Willie Morales.
She was sort of a movement lawyer, and she was like a William Kunstler type.
Yep.
The famous radical lawyer from the 60s and the 70s and the 80s. And she was very involved with FALN and with the May 19th. Another person who declined my...
Your request for an interview?
Yes, perhaps understandably.
So one of her clients was Willie Morales, who was the bomb maker for...
For the FALN.
Yes. Can you tell that story?
We called them Flan.
Yeah, Flan. Whereas there's Armada Liberación Nacional, the Puerto Rican independistas, sort of Cuba aligned. Basically, we need to be an independent country. Involved in some pretty horrific violence, particularly in the 70s. I mentioned the Francis Tavern in Lower Manhattan.
New York, yeah.
It's killed 4 people. And
they were supposed to bomb the bicentennial in Philadelphia as well, but they didn't.
Yeah. So it's July of 1978, and Willie Morales, who's the sort of the chief bomb maker of the FALN, is working on a new project in his apartment in Queens. It's a hot day. He's working in his bomb factory. He's in Elmhurst, Queens, if you know where that neighborhood is. And he crosses the wrong wires, and the bomb blows up in his face. So the upstairs neighbor or downstairs neighbor calls the cops. Willie has managed to, this blast. He's lost half of his face, and he's lost 9 of his 10 fingers in this. The police come in. Everyone is obviously very jumpy. They take Morales away, and the cops notice that there's a blood trail leading up to the stove. And one of the dials on the gas has got blood on it. And what they deduced was that Morales was trying to turn on the gas, hoping that when the cops came, as they inevitably would, one would light a cigarette or a cigar and the place would blow up. Pretty hardcore.
With half of his face on, too.
Yeah, exactly.
Mutilated.
Yeah, he's mutilated, but he ain't dead and he ain't giving up. Against the wishes of the FBI, he winds up at Bellevue Hospital. He doesn't get his fingers sewn back on because this was the story that they wanted to keep the fingers as evidence. He's going to get a pair of artificial hands, and he's waiting around in this prison ward. One of the people working at Bellevue is the medical doctor, Alan Berkman, who winds up as an important member of May 19th. He's one of the guys. Susan Typograph is his lawyer. He's lying around waiting for his new hands to come. So this is May 1979. Somebody, some people say it was Susan Typograph. She says it wasn't her. Smuggled in bolt cutters. And he was able to snip the rather thin screens over the windows. And with the help of FALN people, members of May 19th, members of the family and the Black Liberation Army, they're all involved in helping Willie escape. And he's got ace bandages, wraps him around to lower himself.
My God.
The ace bandages broke and he fell like a story and crashed into this air conditioning unit. Got spirited away. This guy made it to Mexico.
Unbelievable.
And was involved in a shootout in Mexico, prison in Mexico. I mean, just incredible. Then he makes it to Cuba, where he is to this day. To the best of our knowledge, he's living in Cuba.
Amazing.
Also, I was going to bring up, there was a post headline that was reminiscent of headless torso in a topless bar.
Yes.
That's like handless terrorist escapes.
Yes. The Post, they were enjoying themselves. And they had some pretty entertaining coverage of May 19th. The Post had started, its turn to the right. And you couldn't ask for a better cast of characters, radical, lesbian, terrorists, bombers. It was the complete package for Rupert Murdoch and his editors.
What did the nation and the experts, the terrorism experts, make of women terrorists or of lesbian women terrorists?
I would say that the professional literature, the terrorism literature, as a field, terrorism studies, I think was pretty underdeveloped. There were certainly psychologists and journalists who wrote about women terrorists, but a lot of them were extremely condescending, to say the least. Not accusing them of penis envy, but, sort of sub-Freudian musings on why women would do this. And it seemed to be particularly shocking to some of these experts. And who knows, maybe, regular, normal people that, women who were meant to be caregivers and the bringers of life could actually kill. This created this cognitive dissonance.
There was a word.
It's called erotomania.
That's hilarious.
I had to look that one up. Erotomania was not what I thought it was.
Basically, the people found it very difficult to see violence and women connected, and something that women were not capable of such savagery. So this is why it was so crazy.
So crazy.
That this was not natural to the female character.
Right.
And we know it's very natural.
Well.
But the literature has developed, and I think attitudes have progressed, if that's the right word. And there was a famous book, I think it came out in the 90s, called Shoot the Women First, which was an early study of female terrorism. And that was apparently the motto of the German counterterrorism force. You want to shoot the women first because they're the most dangerous. We've already had the Baader-Meinhof gang, for God's sake, in the early 1970s. I'm not sure why people were so shocked.
Can we start moving to the Capitol bombing, which is the title of your book?
Yeah. So they're in the middle of a campaign. Their first bombing is out on Staten Island, of all places. And there was this little FBI resident office in the St. George neighborhood in Staten Island.
Mm-hmm.
They wound up bombing that and doing some damage and decided, we're going to hit these targets that are really going to shock the imperialists. We're going to show the third world liberation movements that there are people in the belly of the beast who have their back. We're going to be the U.S. outpost and violent supporters of these movements. So in November of 1983, they decided it earlier, the U.S. Capitol. If you're going to be involved in terrorism, and admittedly, it's somewhat symbolic terrorism, I don't think they went into this saying we want to kill a lot of these rich, fat, white guys who have their boots on the necks of the third world. It's symbolic, Every American knows it. Most people in the world probably have seen it in pictures anyway, built with slave labor on top of everything else. So November 7th, 1983, they came into town the night before. Roll into town, stay at a sleazy motel out on Rhode Island Avenue. No security to speak of. The Capitol had actually already been bombed in the early 1970s by the Weather Underground, but still there was really no security to speak of. They're able to plant a bomb outside the main chamber, the Senate chamber. It goes off. It does what purported to be, someone claims it does $1 million worth of damage. Doesn't kill anybody. Hell of a racket. People outside can hear it, out on Constitution Avenue. They sent a message to National Public Radio, perhaps another reason for the Trump administration's hatred of NPR. Anyway, they pick NPR, which broadcast this message. It's from a group called the Armed Resistance Unit. The men and women, mostly women, in May 19th, they adopt different names. Red Guerrilla Resistance, Armed Resistance Unit, things like that. Not uncommon for terrorist groups. And there's a message, tonight we bombed the U.S. Capitol. It's an international news story. $1 million worth of damage, big crater. They managed to shred a portrait of Senator John C. Calhoun, a hated figure, a man who the great historian Richard Hofstadter referred to as the Karl Marx of the master class, the theorist of secession. And anyway, his picture gets blasted and it gets press attention. But, I've mentioned to so many people, I've talked about this to so many people who were in Washington, even people who were in Washington at the time. It's like, I don't remember that. I think during the 70s, there were literally thousands of bombings in the United States. That was the lingua franca of many, many groups and individuals. I mean, thousands of terrorist bombings. Hard to remember. Now, we're talking 1983, so this is sort of after that wave. But I think people sort of inured to this.
Like the way we treat school shootings a little bit.
Yeah, I think there was some of that.
We're numb to it.
Yes.
Well, that was interesting when you brought up that poor Brinks driver who had almost lost his arm during the robbery and then ended up dying in the World Trade Center. Gideon and I were speaking, like, there's people who have survived school shootings only to survive other mass shootings.
Yes.
I'm sure back then bombings were like yet another one.
Yeah, this is part of this campaign. They go on to bomb a computer center at the Washington Navy Yard. They bombed an officers' club, the National War College, also in D.C. They bombed, and this is over like a 2-year period, Patrolmen's Benevolent Association office. Why? Because they're opposed to cop killers. They bombed the Israeli Aircraft Industries Association on West 23rd Street. Why? Because they hate Zionism. They hate what they call settler colonialism in Israel and occupied West Bank.
The other one that was interesting is what they were anti-apartheid, and so they tried to go after a South African football team that was landing at JFK, but they got the dates wrong. And so they threw acid on a cop anyway.
Yeah, so this was the South African rugby team, the national rugby team, the Springboks. They were seen as these ambassadors for the apartheid regime, and they were on this sort of goodwill tour. And there had been a place in upstate New York where there was supposed to be some kind of exhibition match. That got bombed, that got called off. The Springboks show up at JFK supposedly. May 19th gets the days wrong. And the people in May 19th decide, well, we're going to have this demonstration anyway. Throwing punches. They throw some kind of acid. One of the women, Donna Borup, they all get arrested. They go to trial. They're at Rikers Island. Donna Borup, the woman who threw the acid, strangely, is out on bail. She escaped. She absconded. She's still on the run. As late as 10 years ago, there were press reports that Donna and Betty Ann Duke were sort of a Thelma and Louise, roaming the country together as fugitives. And Borup is certainly still wanted. $100,000 if anyone has any information. Do you want to talk about Betty Ann's falling into the clutches of the state?
Sure.
She's our bad Elizabeth.
And that was happening when other people were getting arrested as well, right?
Yeah. So the Brinks robbery really sets the law enforcement and prosecutorial antibodies in motion. There are a whole bunch of arrests. One of the most spectacular was of Susan Rosenberg and Tim Blunk. They were caught in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, at a storage locker that had hundreds of pounds of degenerating dynamite, all kinds of automatic weapons, thousands of rounds of ammunition, fake Social Security cards, fake IDs for FBI agents. They get caught. And later, during the course of this, multi-year investigation, the police are going into safe houses or places they suspect May 19th has been. And one of the names they keep coming across and finding fingerprints of. And this was on a raid at a M19 member's apartment on West 95th Street. Silvia Beraldini, an Italian national who lived in the United States. Anyway, they find information about Betty Ann Duke. They find her prints in this apartment. And so this is November of 1982. So they really they say, oh, yeah, keep an eye on her. By 1985, by the spring of 1985, things are really getting hot for the members of May 19th. A bunch of the May 19th people, they're kind of peripatetic. They're moving around. They're renting apartments here and there. They move periodically for reasons of security. They wind up in Baltimore, of all places. And Betty Ann rents an apartment under an assumed name. And a bunch of the women are there. The FBI has this under surveillance. Betty Ann and Alan Berkman, the doctor, really start getting freaked out. They decide to leave. The FBI raids. They capture Laura Whitehorn, ex-Weather Underground person, prominent member of May 19th. And Berkman and Betty Ann decide, we're going to run for it. We're going to go to the Poconos. Kind of an interesting choice. They're going to go to some kind of like honeymoon hotel in the Poconos, and they're going to hide out in the Poconos. One thing leads to another. They stop for dinner. This is in Doylestown, Pennsylvania. Basically, the FBI gets the drop on them. The FBI decide, we got to stop them. The car is loaded with weapons. They're both armed with 9mm pistols, loaded. They get hauled in. The judge, they get hauled in front of a magistrate. Betty Ann says, hey, we're revolutionary anti-imperialists. This is what we do. Here we are. And Berkman, who's already on the run for a whole variety of offenses, bail jumping and other stuff, the judge is like, no bail for you. But he somehow takes a shine to Betty Ann Duke. And her family, her loving family down in Texas, they put up a house, to post bond. She agrees to all these conditions. And the judge says, okay, we're going to give you bail. But you have to go down to Texas. And when we have hearings, you have to come back up and you have to stay with a court-approved lawyer. And you can only have so much money at a time. And again, this was an earlier age. Hard to imagine somebody like that getting bail nowadays. But she got bail. She comes back to Philadelphia. This is all being heard in the Eastern District of Pennsylvania. And she has to stay with this court-approved lawyer. Her name is Judith Chomsky. This is second week of October of 1985. She's staying with Judy Chomsky. Judy comes down on the morning of the 14th and sees a note from Betty Ann. And it says, sorry, I'm out of here.
Bye-bye.
Dear John.
Yes.
So since that date, 1985, she's been on the run, and we don't know whether she's still alive.
Or in Cuba.
Could she be in witness protection? Is that a possibility or no?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
I mean, the feds wouldn't really have much to gain out of it because they kind of knew everything. They didn't need her to convict the others, some of whom were already in prison.
So she could be like Leonardo DiCaprio in one battle after another.
That's true. Maybe she's in Mexico. It's hard to say, but there's $100,000 out there waiting, going to the person who gives information leading to her prosecution.
So here's the question that we ask of all our guests at the end is, so Betty Ann Duke, is she a bad Elizabeth? What are your thoughts?
Well, I am a scholar of political violence. I like to think of myself as analytical. I'm reluctant to be normative. I mean, reluctant to be normative. Yes, she's a criminal. She was involved in extreme violence. After the Capitol bombing, they said, well, we decided not to kill anyone this night. We could have. And then later on, they were writing endlessly. They were writing these screeds and talking about their programs and their thoughts and their this and that. And they talked about the need for selective assassination. I mean, they wrote this down. I guess they believed it. I think Betty Ann could have killed for the cause. So it's a kind of a wishy-washy answer. I mean, I think as a citizen, yes, I think she was a bad Elizabeth. But as a student of this kind of violence, I'd have to reserve judgment. Put it that way.
I would agree. So we don't think there's going to be a movie about these May 19thers. You said this book got optioned, but it's such a great story.
Well, thank you. It got optioned a couple of times and didn't get picked up. I mean, I still think the cinematic and dramatic possibilities are kind of endless. I was told at one point that there were various actresses who were interested in it, but they got kind of, and this is just Hollywood gossip and third hand, but they just got kind of spooked by it, and that they would somehow be, I don't know, portrayed as pro-terrorist, or it would damage their careers in some way. And I understand. I mean, I totally get that, because to do it properly, you would have to have empathy with these characters. They can't be monsters. I think there's a lot in there. I think the story, I think it holds up over time.
It certainly does. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to go through this very complicated but exciting story. There's many, many moving parts. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Thanks again to Bill Rosenau. Everybody buy his book, Tonight We Bombed the U.S. Capitol. It's fascinating. Thank you for listening to Bad Elizabeth. Please rate and review the show on places like Apple Podcasts and Spotify.
We are Bad Elizabeth Pod on Instagram and Substack.
Bad Elizabeth is recorded at Jet Road Studios. It is hosted by me, Gideon Evans.
And me, Kathy Egan-Taylor. It is produced and engineered by Will Beckton, and our executive producer is Amber Beckton.
Our theme music was composed by Alexis Cuadrado and Danny Gray.
Thanks again for listening. We'll see you next time.